Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Chuck Betters and I'm coming to you from Ask Dr. Betters. This is our YouTube channel and my dad is the original Ask Dr. Betters and he's invited me to be part of helping to answer the many questions that have been submitted. And one of the questions that was submitted is this: what is your favorite chapter in the Bible? What is your favorite chapter in the Bible? So it's an interesting question because when I get asked questions like that, I believe that my musician's brain turns on. I'm a classical musician and obviously I love music and I love all different genres of music. So when I think about being a pianist and the different genres just of piano music, there's the Baroque period, so there's Bach and Handel, there's the classical period with Beethoven and Mozart, many other composers, of course. There's a Romantic period, composers like Chopin and Brahms. There's a contemporary period, modern day period, that would be Prokofiev, Rachmaninoff, and many modern day composers. I think that film composers might have a chance of standing the test of time many years from now, that some of the great scores that are written for movies and films might stand the test of time. Who knows? Hans Zimmer comes to mind. But anyway, I digress. My point is that when I hear what is your favorite chapter in the Bible, I immediately think in terms of genre of the books of the Bible. So I want to ask, okay, well, what genre are you talking about? Because it's hard to just take one chapter from the entire Bible. Are we talking about the poetry books, books like the Psalms and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, Job even, Song of Solomon? These are called the poetry books. Are we talking about the major prophets, prophets like Isaiah and Daniel and Ezekiel, Jeremiah, or the minor prophets, all the little ones at the end of the Old Testament? Are we talking about the Gospels? Because each of the Gospels is a very unique genre. That's the good news, the telling of the good news. It's called the Evangelion. We're talking about the letters of Paul or the general letters, or you can go on and on and on. So it's difficult to really narrow it down to one chapter. But if I had to narrow it down to one chapter, and maybe it's just the point of my life that I'm at right now, the one chapter that comes to mind, of course, and this is too easy, it's Romans 8. I believe that Romans 8 is not only the greatest chapter in the Bible, but it's one of the great, it's one of the great works of art in all of literature. So Romans 8 seems like low-hanging fruit. That's an easy answer, but I want to give one that may not be on everyone's radar, and it's become a favorite chapter for me. And it comes from the letter that Paul wrote to the Corinthians. And it's actually the second letter that he wrote in 2 Corinthians. And the chapter is 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And if you really want to be blessed, just read that chapter. And when you know the context of it, we can never truly know the full context of all of the events and everything that was going on in the heart of the people who were writing these letters. They give us a lot of information and we can learn a lot of information, but we'll never know the full context of it. And so from my kind of study of the book of Corinthians, the letters to the Corinthians, it seems to me that the first letter that Paul wrote to the Corinthians, it was obviously very pastoral, and he's dealing with a lot of the problems in the church at Corinth. And there was a lot of problems, but he also gives them just some great chapters. You think about 1 Corinthians and some of the chapters in his first letter. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11 is on the Lord's Supper, and we have the words of institution that he repeats, that the words that Jesus had said in the Gospels, these words of institution that are said at the Lord's Supper, even in today's churches all over the world. And it's just a beautiful chapter. And then in 1 Corinthians 13, of course, is the love chapter. It's something that we hear at weddings all the time. But there's other chapters in 1 Corinthians as well. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 is on the resurrection of Jesus. It's just a glorious chapter about the proofs of the resurrection. Paul just riffs on Jesus' resurrection, on the witnesses who saw him, and what that means for us, that Jesus is the first fruits of our own resurrection. And so there's just one chapter after another in the letter to the Corinthians, the first letter, that is just pastoral and beautiful and encouraging. He also exhorts the Corinthians in many areas. But the second letter is different, in my opinion. The second letter to the Corinthians, there's some things that have happened in between the first and second letters, and you can read it and you can feel it as you're reading the opening to 2 Corinthians. All that to say, I've always seen this letter as a pastor who has been hurt by the congregation. He writes it in that context. He even talks about in the beginning of 2 Corinthians, he said that he spared them God's judgment by leaving them sooner than he would have liked to have left them when he had visited them because of the way they were treating him. And then he talks in 2 Corinthians 2, he has this interesting thing where he essentially says that he forgives them, and he gives us a beautiful picture of what forgiveness looks like. But he also says there will be no more painful visits between him and the Corinthians. It's like he's kind of drawing some lines in the sand for them. And so the whole context of it, he gets defensive of his apostleship. He talks about his apostleship. He talks a lot about his sufferings. And so right in the middle of that, it's amazing to me that he shared these incredibly encouraging words, incredibly hopeful words in the middle of a letter where there was some conflict there between him and between the Corinthians that he was addressing. But still, in 2 Corinthians 4, just listen to a few of these verses. Verse 7, "But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us." And here's one of my favorite verses. "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed." Isn't it interesting that he gives these characteristics of things that they're going through? So he says that you're hard-pressed, right? You're hard-pressed on every side, and maybe you can relate. You're hard-pressed, you feel like life's coming in on you from every side, but not crushed. So you may be hard-pressed, but you're not crushed. That reminds me of the verse in Hebrews where it says that you may have suffered, but not under the point of blood. So it's the same idea. We're hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, so confused, but not in despair. And then this is interesting. He says persecuted, right? So you're persecuted. It's almost like, well, everyone knows you're persecuted. Everyone knows you're being persecuted. So think about what they were facing back then. I mean, we can't really say in today's church that we're being persecuted. But Paul was saying, yes, you're being persecuted. Just like you're being hard-pressed on every side, just like you may be perplexed, you're also persecuted. That should be something that we expect as Christians, that we are persecuted. I mean, I think that if we were persecuted the way that the Christians in the early church were persecuted, we'd go crazy. I mean, but he says, like, that should be expected. You're persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. For we who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake. We who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake. I mean, don't you feel so many times that you die so many little deaths along the way? You know, the death of a relationship, the death of a dream, the death of an expectation, the death of a job, whatever it may be, the death of just maybe some joy that you have. And he says that we're always being given over to death. Why? For Jesus' sake. Why? So that this life may also be revealed in our mortal body. So then death is at work in us, but life is at work in you as well. And then I skip down to verse 16. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. And here's another great verse. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal.
Hello, my name is Danielle Cantler, team member here at MARKINC Ministries. Thank you so much for your continued support of this video series. Ask Dr. Betters is not meant to be a substitute for professional counseling, but instead is designed to extract the biblical principles around the questions being asked. We encourage you to seek professional counseling if needed. Professional counselors are ready to assist you at Anchored Hope Biblical Counseling. See the links below for more information on Anchored Hope and all of the free resources we offer here at MARKINC Ministries. Thank you for watching and welcome to the MARKINC family.